My personal opinion on addiction is that it's not just a genetic factor, and it's not just a chemical factor. Addictive personalities were created during childhood. There was an emotional need that the child had that wasn't able to be met because the parents' emotional understanding wasn't deep enough to actually meet that need. So it was neglected and exiled, like it was just in your head, you stopped making it a part of yourself. You completely just ignored that other part of you that existed that had that emotional need because it's not going to be met, and you know that. Then anyways, you're growing up and you haven't thought about that emotional need since you were fucking 5. But the subconscious part of you that holds your emotions still thinks about those emotional needs that aren't being met all the fucking time. And so what you do to satisfy that is you go into drugs, you go into abusive relationships, you watch a bunch of TV, you eat a lot, you drink a lot, you have too much sex. I don't know, just literally anything that gives you happy chemicals can be an addiction. Like what seems like happens is once you get off of your socially unacceptable addiction, you just go towards a socially acceptable addiction. Like I grew up in a family of addicts and they got sober. But like all they did was just have children and pretend everything was okay. And then their addiction became children and work and like pretending to have a normal life. Like they had this ego to feed that was bigger than them. It was like supporting these emotional needs they didn't even know they had. And so this is just my personal belief. But I think a lot of the genetic addictive qualities that seem to pass on, like the genetic addictive traits that seem to pass on, I think it's really just generational trauma. Because let's say you're a kid and your parent doesn't know how to support or acknowledge your emotional needs, then you grow up and you become a parent who doesn't know how to support or acknowledge those emotional needs. And then that kid grows up and continues, so on. That's generational trauma. Those issues are never really fixed until you actually look at them. And I think the reason addiction might be genetic is just because that's such a common thing. And there's such a common genetic pattern between people who end up being addicts because there's just something in that family that hasn't been emotionally acknowledged yet. There are other biological and chemical processes that have to do with addiction as well, and I'm not trying to discredit that by saying that this is my theory. I personally think all of those work together in more ways than we understand. But you are correct. This is how addictive personalities work. I definitely have an addictive personality, whether I have a drug addiction to show for it or not. I definitely have one. And my goal on this page is to try to get to the bottom of that addictive personality rather than performatively trying to heal it and pretend that I don't have an addictive personality so that everyone can socially see me as okay. Does that make sense? Like, my goal is to heal that emotional wound rather than just dancing around coping mechanisms for it.